Greg, speaking of the MCU, let's talk about somebody who made quite the name for himself in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, although he was very famous before that franchise ever existed. Robert Downey Jr. refuses to let Hollywood create his AI digital replica. I intend to sue all future executives who recreate my likeness, Robert Downey Jr. says. This is an article from Variety. Obviously, Greg, maybe the topic we've talked about more than anything in the last year is AI and digital likeness of actors. We've seen it with a lot of dead actors now. Peter Cushing being brought back, the gentleman from the first Alien film being brought back for Romulus. It's happening more and more, and it's clearly becoming a trend. But Robert Downey Jr., who obviously very famously played Tony Stark throughout the MCU, very beloved for that role, is kind of shutting down any shot that he'll allow that legally. So I want to read this excerpt from him from this Variety article. So it was on a podcast he said this. He was like, "I intend to sue all future executives." And then here's a later quote. "There's two tracks. How do I feel about everything that's going on? I feel about it minimally because I have an actual emotional life that's occurring. It doesn't have a lot of room for that." He said when asked about being digitally recreated, "To go back to the MCU, I'm not worried about them hijacking my character's soul because there's like 3 or 4 guys and gals who make all the decisions there anyway, and they would never do that to me or without me," he added. Um, when then the host, Kara Swisher, who we know who Kara Swisher is, she told him, "You'll be dead." And Robert Downey responded to her and said, "But my law firm will still be very active." So yeah, it seems like he's already put in place the plans to push back against any sort of use of his AI replica. Even in his death, he says he will have folks taking care of that. But Greg, what's your take on this as somebody who speaks about AI very
I mean, like
frequently?
he's right, but the fact is, like, I don't think he won't live to see that issue. Like we might not even live to see the issue. I think where you're going to run into problems is when the great grandchildren want a quick buck. I've talked about that before, right? Like, yes, Robert Downey, great guy, right? Cares about his likeness. Kids probably care about his likeness. Maybe his grandkids care about it. When you get to great grandkid territory and that money's gone and they want a quick buck, because like just look at IP. That's how it is with intellectual property all the time. Someone creates something and then like 20, 30 years later, when the great grandkids are run out of money, they sign the rights over to Disney or they sign the rights over to Warner Brothers and they lose it, right? Because they want the money, for whatever reason. And then they don't care about how hard their great grandfather worked. They didn't know the dude, right? It becomes less personable, more of a transaction. Like, I have this item people want, I want to sell it. So great,
Right.
good for him. But I think when his great grandchildren want a quick buck, when all the money that he's made is gone, we're going to see this a lot more, I think, in 3 or 4 generations. A lot more AI actors popping off everywhere from great grandkids not giving a shit. And that's, I mean, I didn't know my great grandfather. You know what I mean? If someone's like, "Hey, can we use your great grandfather's face in this movie? We'll give you $2 million." Why would I say no?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I think that's the issue we're going to run into. It's not going to be an issue now while these actors are still alive and their kids are alive, but as generations start to span and AI gets more advanced, it can do more things, it can be more accurate and look better. This is going to be a huge issue, a gigantic issue. I mean, I've already seen there are multiple YouTube channels already using it, like just in music videos and sketches. Like they're using AI. You can always tell because it has a certain look to it, right? But like eventually, I think eventually, just it's unavoidable. I don't know if we'll see it in my lifetime, Donovan. I don't know if you'll see it in your lifetime, but I think eventually it's unavoidable. Like we'll be making movies with the original cast of Avengers 50, 75 years from now with AI replicating their voice and their movements and their face. So it is
It
smart to do
all
this now, but it's not ready yet.
it all just depends on where governance falls on this, right? Because I think RDJ has a point where he's like, "Yeah, I'll die one day, but like my law firm will still be alive and working under my orders." That's true. The question, like you said, is for how long, right?
Right.
Like, okay, so how long until everybody at your law firm dies and everybody who they hire dies? And like, at what point do the people running the show go, "Yeah, we'll take $100 million, like, so you can like digitally make him Iron Man again"? But I think the big thing to think about here is you know does the government ever step in, right? Will there be an inciting incident or something terrible happen, or there be a massive groundbreaking lawsuit that makes the government step in and be like, okay, now there's 400 years of restriction, like will there ever be law set in stone like that, right? Right now with copyright we have like laws where it's like 90 years after your creator's death or whatever. Will
110.
eventually we get something like will we eventually get something like that with AI? I think there's a good chance we do, only because people are going to keep pushing the envelope until they push it too far, and somebody has to step in. I mean, California Governor Newsom has already signed bills regarding AI, and that's really just in the preliminary era of it. It hasn't even really become as big of a problem yet. But I imagine that stuff like that will only
Yeah.
increase as the issue grows.
No,
Um,
I don't trust our
but
government to
you
manage
know,
that at all. Like they barely understand how Facebook works. You want them to manage something as complex as this? You know what I mean? And then like the incidental details of, oh well, it did scrape the site, but it only used this section of the pinky to recreate it. Like, how do you put a price value on that? Right?
mhm,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
I mean, like, and I'm not justifying it. I'm just playing devil's advocate for the sake of argument. That's like you could cut a penny into quarters, it's still stealing, but you stole a fourth of a quarter. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? You stole how many cents? Like, how much value is? It's weird, and you're right. It needs regulation badly, and like until we get younger people in our government that understand the nuances of the internet and the technology and how it works, it's just going to be a shit show. And like, I don't trust our government, anyone in power, to even understand how this works, because they don't even understand how Facebook works.
yeah,
And that's the sad thing. And like
that's
I mean,
fair.
and like a good example too is like it's enough time may pass where no one will care if Robert Downey was in a movie anymore. I know that's really like I know right now in 2024 it's really silly to think that, but like that's like making an AI movie and saying Clark Gable's in it. Everyone's gonna go, who? Who's Clark Gable?
Right.
Who
Mhm.
cares? Because
Well,
it's too
I
old.
guess
Yeah.
I guess then, Greg, devil's advocate. So let's say,
Yeah.
there are 200 years pass and there's no one alive left willing or bound to fight for Robert Downey Jr.'s digital likeness. On the other hand, is there anybody alive that cares if he's in a movie? Like,
Exactly.
if
Yeah.
it
No. Yeah. Dead
if in
on.
two,
Yep.
but my point then goes, why even why even bother then? In 200 years, if nobody on Earth cares that you have Iron Man in the next Marvel movie, then why even at that point you might as well just keep moving with whoever's alive and new at that point. Nobody will have nostalgia for it. The people watching will be like, wait, who's that?
Especially with my generation, our generation being so having this collectible mentality. I mean, looking back at my office, like this next year when we die, like our kids are gonna have to deal with all these like statues and collectibles that may not be worth anything depending on what current pop culture is trending. Collector
Yard
plates,
sale.
beanie babies, you know what I mean? Like crystal animals, like that was a thing in the 90s that people don't remember. Like they're worthless. They were worthless. My grandma spent tens of thousands of dollars on this huge collection of crystal animals. We couldn't give those away. Nobody wanted them. Like it's just it. You know, these trends have lasted generations. This IP is a little bit more stronger than that, but like, who knows? You don't know what the next generation might be into. We may get rid of this whole like consumerism IP thing completely. You don't know. It's wild to me
Mm,
though. It's wild, but you're right though. Like, who's gonna care? Robert Downey Jr. What's the value of that? Why even bother doing it? Because they can't.
yeah.
That would be the. Might as well try it, right, Donovan? Like, see if people still give a shit about Clark Gable. Like
Mm,
Peter Cushing.
yeah.
Like, you know, that lawsuit's probably going well for Disney because people are using them in other places. So this reminds me of the issue with Katy Perry's fireworks song. I've told this story on the stream before, but I worked at a promo house in LA, and through like some weird contract loophole with like Universal Music Group, like the rights to the last 20 seconds of that song lapsed. So like
Mm,
for 48 hours, anybody, if you made a promo and put it on national television, which was a big deal at the time, you didn't have to pay any rights. So like we made like 20 different promos to push a show using Katy Perry's fireworks song. It was like a
right.
48-hour weird contract lap, but that so stuff like that, right, can slip through maybe. I don't know. Fun. I like to tell that
Yeah.
story. It's fun.
No, that's no, that's fair. I mean, it's there's a lot of aspects to that conversation. Before we leave this topic, I do want to read one more longer quote from Robert Downey Jr. from this podcast. um, because whether or not however much it ends up mattering in the future, I do think it's significant that an actor as prominent as him is having such a blatant anti-AI stance. I think that's better than if he came out and was like, "Yeah, come on, Marvel, let's do it. Let's get fake Tony Stark in the movies." And here's his quote. I don't envy anyone who has ever been over identified with the advent of this new phase of the information age. The idea that somehow it belongs to them because they have these super huge startups is a fallacy. The problem is that when these individuals believe that they are the arbiters of managing this, but meanwhile are wanting and or needing to be seen in a favorable light, That is a massive fucking error. It turns me off and makes me not want to engage with them because they are not being truthful. Um, and at the end of the article, they just talk about some other upcoming
I mean,
projects.
I gotta say this though, like I really do, like I don't know Robert personally. I don't know him as a person, right? I do know that his life was very difficult at a certain point in time. He had a rough childhood. He fell down the drug train in the 90s and 80s in Hollywood really bad, and he bounced back. And I've never seen a man more appreciative and more intelligent about learning from that. You know what I mean? Like someone who grew from that mistake. And everyone, and not just actors, everyone I've seen that interviews him, they tell him he's professional, he's kind, he's courteous, and I love hearing that, you know, because people
I've
can
seen that as well. Yeah, he seems like a great
assholes,
interview.
and
I
you
like
never
RDJ
know,
a
and you
lot.
never know because nobody knows these. We don't know these people. I don't know Tom Holland. I don't know Robert. I don't know these
What?
actors. Like I don't know who they are,
Me and
right?
Jenna
Like,
Ortega
and
been
so like it's
friends.
really easy to judge someone on the outside if they blow up or have a bad day or whatever. But like Robert seems to be pretty cool guy. Like I just in general, like if
Yeah,
even if you don't like his movies, I can still respect him. The dude tried really hard to overcome addiction, had abusive father, just terrible fucking life, and
yeah,
he went to the top. So you know, I'm not even mad at him. He's doing really good
yeah.
stuff, and he comes out sometimes and says really intelligent things a lot. So why not? Like